Hey guys, Stockaholics, thanks for being here today. Tanker stocks crash. This is a volatile industry, especially in terms of investing. You can quickly lose your lunch, both metaphorically and in actuality in this sector. In this video, I'm going to be talking about an event that I think is really important to understanding a few things about where we are in this industry. And that was something that actually happened in 2019 called the COSCO Sanctions. I'm going to explain what that is and go into detail on why I think it's really important for understanding the other things I'm going to be talking about in this video, supply and demand. Ultimately, we need to see less available ships than cargoes for there to be really high rates. So that's what I'm looking for to really get excited about investing. So I'm going to talk about some scrapping, and we'll talk about new builds. And then I'll kind of close the video talking about what I'm doing and some other thoughts on maybe an investment strategy. Okay, so in 2019, Donald Trump, while president, initiated sanctions on this company, COSCO. It was kind of a trade war kind of thing, trying to get push some leverage to kind of balance out trade between China and the United States. In any case, what happened during that, at least in terms of tankers, there were a lot of tankers that were removed from the fleet, from deliveries. Now, there's a lot of sanctions that are taking place right now, for example, in Iran and Venezuela. And I think that to some extent those are perhaps either totally ineffective or slightly ineffective, at least in terms of oil tanker trade, the oil tanker trade. But in any case, when we're talking about this company, COSCO actually does a lot of business with the United States. So when Donald Trump put sanctions on this company, they largely complied. So there were a set amount of vessels that were removed from the fleet, and we really got to see what happened in terms of rates when those vessels were removed. Okay, so this is an article taken from the New York Times in January of 2020, right as the pandemic first started. So the U.S. Treasury removed Chinese tanker operators from blacklist. Restriction tied to Iranian trade was applied to COSCO Group businesses in September. So from September until approximately January of 2020, the sanctions were in place, and COSCO largely complied, like I mentioned. So the U.S. Treasury Department on Friday removed sanctions on 2 tanker operators within China's COSCO Group that were blacklisted last year for allegedly transporting Iranian oil in violation of U.S. prohibitions. So it's one large kind of shipping conglomerate, but they have different kind of segments in their company, China's COSCO Group, for different, I think largely different types of vessels. The sanctions placed on the units of COSCO's Shipping Energy Transportation Ltd. in September triggered a spike in oil transport costs as crude producers, fearing U.S. penalties, immediately stopped using any tankers associated within the COSCO Group. Now, before this happened, tanker rates were horrible. They from 2017, 2018, and 2019, there was an oversupply of vessels on the market. There was a lot of scrapping taking place up until this point. The Treasury subsequently clarified that only businesses within the named subsidiaries and not sister COSCO companies was banned by its action. So this largely affected tankers. I don't know so much about the other segments, but I do know for a fact it affected a lot of tankers. COSCO Shipping Energy Transportation, or CSET, runs a fleet of 120 tankers, including 44 VLCCs, very large crude carriers. At least 65% of the fleet had been blacklisted, a person with knowledge of the matter said. The company, something happened with the share price as a result of some good news, those sanctions being lifted, at least for this company, right? But if you look at what happened with all of the other tanker companies when these sanctions were lifted, there was a massive sell-off. This was even before a lot of the COVID fears were taking place, right? Now, what's interesting about this is that we actually have a data point. We know based on 2019 levels of demand, of oil demand, about how many tankers can be removed from the fleet before you start to see really high rates during the winter months. There's especially quarter four, when you really see those seasonally high rates for tankers. Okay, so we know that if 65% of COSCO's then fleet was removed from the market, then rates go up. Now, we don't know for sure if that is the level exactly when supply and demand start to become imbalanced, when there are not enough vessels, or if it's at a point lower than that. We only know that if we get to that point, then at least in terms of 2019 levels of oil demand, then rates go up, right? And they went up a lot. So we can assume that, I think, at least I can assume that the actual point where supply and demand, would meet, is at a point lower than that in terms of rates going up, right? So COSCO owns, or today it actually owns more vessels than it did even 2 years, a lot more, by the way. But COSCO owns VLCCs, they own Suezmaxes, they own Panamaxes, and they own Aframaxes, and they also own some smaller vessels as well, I believe. The VLCCs they own a lot of. That was one of the biggest ones. So for me, what I really want to see, for me to get excited in terms of this event, in terms of oil demand and current levels of oil demand, we want to see a lot of large vessels being removed. I want to see, 30 or so VLCCs being removed from the fleet. I want to see, 40 Suezmaxes, and a similar amount of Aframaxes being removed from the fleet before I believe we're going to start to see some really high rates. Okay, so this is oil demand by year from the EIA. So some interesting points. Here's 2019, 2020, this black line. By the way, these are the averages for those years. These are black lines. And then this is this year, right? So as of present, we are still below 2019 levels of oil demand. So what that means in terms of oil tankers, that's not great, because you have less overall deliveries of that stuff, right? If there's lower oil demand, there's less deliveries taking place, right? So the COSCO sanctions is a relevant event for 2019 levels of oil demand, right? So even during 2019, under normal conditions, if there was not COSCO sanctions taking place, there were still too many vessels. Okay, so that's why, for me to get really excited about tankers, I really need to see a lot of scrapping taking place. I need to see more scrapping taking place than vessels coming on the market, and that's not what we're seeing at present. So even though share prices are coming down, it's if they get cheap enough, I'll probably still buy them, but I think there's still a lot of downside. Now, there is going to be a point, likely in 2022, and especially beyond there, when oil demand goes beyond 2019 levels of demand, right? So if and when that happens, if you have a higher oil demand base, then you can have more tankers on the market. So at that point, when oil demand gets higher, rates will likely go up, especially in those winter months, right? And especially if we can get significant amounts of scrapping in the interim. Now, so far this year, we have seen scrapping, and it's good to see, because if you look in 2020, 2019, not a lot of scrapping taking place, but makes sense because rates were so good. Owners were disincentivized to scrap, right? 2021, we are seeing scrapping picking up. Now, I did an update a month ago. Since then, we've seen 2 VLCCs being scrapped, and we've seen, I believe, 3 Aframaxes being scrapped. And as far as Panamaxes and Suezmaxes go, those have stayed the same. I've looked at some other sites, and there are a lot of those really tiny vessels that have also been scrapped. But if you look at scrapping in terms of some years past, when rates were very bad for very long, for example, in 2018 and 2017, these numbers are a lot larger. Now, 2017 was coming off of one of those periods where they had done pretty well in those oil glut years prior, right? So scrapping was a little bit lower, but it took some time. And then in 2018, scrapping really picked up, right? So I would expect there's going to be a similar result if rates stay anemic, that you will see maybe, but this is not that bad considering we're at the half-year point, right? We're on track to beat the 2017 level. Although the main laggard here is Suezmaxes, right? And Suezmaxes are big vessels, so we want to see a lot of those being scrapped, and especially VLCCs, right? But I would expect that 2021, it's been a year since rates have been very bad. I expect scrapping. I expect some, and I expect more scrapping this year. But if these anemic rates continue in 2022, I would expect some very, very significant scrapping. Okay, but this is where I start to get not so excited, right? A lot of the oil tanker owners out there, they say, well, we don't know what to order. There's the IMO regulations, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the order book, you look at what's being ordered, that's a complete fallacy, right? Because we can see new buildings, guys. So in 2021, there are a bunch of vessels that are slated to hit the market. And by the way, in 2020, we saw almost no scrapping. It doesn't include the new buildings that hit the water in 2020. And there were a lot of vessels that hit the water too. So we need that amount of vessels to also be scrapped to reach those 2019 levels of vessels, right? So we need a lot of scrapping, right? These are vessels that are slated to hit the water too in 2022, right? And in 2023, there are some vessels. Now, the longer these rates stay low, and I expect them to stay low, even during the winter months currently this year. But the longer they stay low, these orders will come down. And the longer they stay low, more and more scrapping will also take place. Okay, so this is taken from Vessels Value. And what this chart is showing us is the vessel age of boats that are still on the market, okay, that are available to deliver oil, right? So currently we have about 60 Suezmaxes that are 20 years or older, and we have about 70 VLCCs that are about 20 years or older. So what you can kind of take away from this chart is that the older these vessels get, the smaller amount of them there are on the market. And the reason for that is because the older vessels get, the more they become scrapped. When you reach about year 20, the costs associated with maintaining that vessel and receiving surveys and all of those things, those costs go up significantly. And the time intervals in which you have to do those surveys goes up also. So basically, the longer you hold an oil tanker, especially these large ones, which we can see on this graph, the costs associated with that go up kind of exponentially, right? So what tends to happen is most vessels, they tend to get scrapped around age 20. So, and that's what we can see here. I also wanted to mention that the current rate environment will also affect the average age of scrapping. So if rates are very good, then the average age of scrapping tends to go up, right? Because those higher costs can be covered by higher earnings, right? The flip side is true also. If rates are very low for a very long period of time, the average age of a vessel scrapping actually goes down. So that's something that we could look forward to if there's several years of anemic earnings. I would expect the average age of vessels being scrapped to get much, much lower. For example, recently we saw a vessel, a 2003 VLCC being scrapped. Now, I don't know the details behind this VLCC, but that's a little bit unusual because that vessel's about 18 years old. Now, there could be some specific things going on with that boat that are maybe that's a dud. Maybe it has some damage that wasn't worth fixing. We don't know the exact details, right? But as time goes on, and if anemic rates stay long enough, the average age of vessels being scrapped diminishes. And this is another reason why. This is taken from a Euronav slide. And what you can kind of see here, by the way, is that the older these vessels get, the less that a lot of people actually want to hire these vessels, right? Let's say you are a company like Exxon or BP, right? And you want to maintain that positive image. You know that the Western narrative is very much against you. You just want to do your business and you don't want to get in trouble. You want to make money somehow, right? If you are hiring a vessel that is very old, right? And you want that cargo to get safely transported from point A to B, your risks go up. But if there is an oversupply of vessels on the market and you can choose which vessels you want for the same amount of price, then to get your cargo from point A to point B, your oil, you're going to choose younger vessels, right? So not only do costs go up as with these vessels, as they get older because of the safety requirements, the surveys, but the amount that you can earn with it usually tends to go down as well. Okay, if you listen to a lot of tanker executives, they have a common narrative that they'll say that IMO regulations are going to limit vessels, right? Because of certain regulations in the future, it's going to make it so that there's going to be increased scrapping, people don't know to order, whatever, right? This right here is kind of proof, I think, that that's kind of a lot of FUD. I think the only thing that really ultimately matters is is the scrapping and new building, and a lot of that has to do with how much money the tankers have for a period of time, right? Not everybody plays by the rules, okay? So what we're seeing here in this slide, this is taken from Euronav, is that there is an illicit trade happening. Although there are sanctions on Venezuela and Iran with a lot of US and US trading partners, not everybody's going to play by the same rules. Not everybody's going to play ball, right? And a lot of these are very old vessels, right? And I think the same could be true for IMO kind of regulations, right? Let's say, it's cheaper to run a oil tanker with the high sulfur fuel or without scrubbers or without any of this IMO stuff, and you can engage in trade around the world. Why would you play ball by the Western rules, right? Why would you care if you can have an advantage about why would you on the environment and all that stuff, right? So for me, although you might hear a lot about this stuff and why this could lead to potential scrapping or where owners don't know what to order, I don't buy into it. The only thing that matters is that rates stay anemic long enough that scrapping takes place, and that the order book and the new builds stay low enough that ultimately supply and demand can match each other. And one more thing I'd like to add on this too, right? Let's say stockaholics, I'm involved in the illicit trade, right? And I've been making $100,000 a day delivering this illicit oil to whichever customers are willing to take it, right? Let's say that those sanctions are lifted and that free trade between all of these nations is suddenly restored, right? These tanker owners are subject to the same rules of the psychology and behavior that everyone else is, right? They are now flush with cash. They have earned a lot of money for a long period of time. They're going to go around trying to make earnings just as everyone else has, but now they have a lot of cash in their pockets. So the argument you hear from a lot of oil tanker owners is that when this ends, these guys will instantly go out and scrap. And I don't think that's true. I think that they will behave in the same way that everyone else behaves, that their pocketbook will have to shrink, that the earnings will have to be anemic for long enough that they actually are incentivized to go out and scrap. I think that if they can engage in this illicit trade long enough and they have a large enough money pool, they're just going to chill with their ship, right? So this would have to end, and then I think there would have to be a period of low rates for these guys before they would go out and scrap, unless their boats are just real rust buckets, right? Now, I love the tanker gang. The tanker gang is one of the most resolute investors I have witnessed. So it is always interesting for me to follow you guys and hear what you guys have to say and your thoughts. There's always a comment that I hear from you guys that teaches me something about the sector, and I hope that some of the things that I've learned from the sector has helped you guys. In any case, let me know if there's something I missed, you think I missed. Be very excited to hear it. I will talk to you guys soon.